We are back on the ML Sports Platter, brought to you by Byrne Dairy and Stanley Law Offices, the Maximum Award people. Go ahead and log on to stanleylawoffices.com today and see how they can help you in New York and Pennsylvania. Such a pleasure to bring onto the program Keith O'Brien. He is the author of Heartland, A Forgotten Place, An Impossible Dream, and the Miracle of Larry Bird. What a book. What an author. Welcome aboard. Congratulations.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Great to be with you. Appreciate it.
So when do you think, before the championship game against Michigan State, Magic, the rivalry, before the NBA, before Lakers, Celtics, before all that stuff, when did the first part of Larry Bird arrive?
Great question. Well, so, Heartland, my new book, is an origin story. This narrative unfolds between 1973 and 1979 in rural Indiana. It is the story of the rise of Larry Bird in Indiana in the 70s and the story of the enduring miracle of his 1979 Indiana State team. Listen, I think, if you want to trace it all the way back to where it begins, there was a coach in French Lick by the name of Jim Jones, a man I've met. He's in his 80s now. And Jim Jones was a bit of a taskmaster, and he believed in the fundamentals. And he coached basically every kid who picked up a basketball in French Lick. And Larry Bird would say later, that he remembered, that Jim Jones taught him how to hold a basketball, taught him how to cup it in his hands. And I do believe if you really want to start somewhere, that's probably where it begins.
It's funny. It's March right now. We're talking basketball. You got a little bit of the raspy throat probably from all the interviews. I like it. You kind of sound like a head coach screaming on the baseline. I love this.
For sure.
Without a doubt. I mean, we can't possibly even today, right? It's 2026. Our world is absolutely crazy. We're trying to keep up with social media, 7 million sports channels. We're all over the place in different directions. Ratings are what they are in March. They are what they are in the NFL, all these different things. But Keith, that championship game with Magic and Bird, I mean, that's still the pinnacle of March, right? I mean, even all these years later, ratings, saving the NBA, setting up the NBA, college basketball, the broadcasters, the theater, the rivalry, the personalities, the opposite of the people, right? Black, white, Magic, Bird, one talks, one doesn't, different backgrounds. That's still going all the way back to 79, the year I was born, by the way. That is still the event in college basketball. For as great as everything else has been since and before, you make the argument that's number one and probably untouchable, right?
Well, certainly from a numbers perspective, it is. 50 million people tuned in to watch Bird Magic in late March 1979. It's an enormous number. I think last year the figure was around 17 million for the final game, much smaller. Listen, we've had a lot of great games in the years since then, but that was significant. It brought these two men, future icons, Bird and Magic, into living rooms nationwide. They both would sign with the Lakers and the Celtics in the weeks ahead. And as we all know, that changes the NBA. But I think more powerful for me in this story in Heartland is how that moment affects the people in the locker room. We know, that game is sort of the spark that ignites March Madness. We know that game, brings us Bird and Magic and the NBA, the saviors of the NBA. But what we don't know is how that moment, changed the lives of the people in the Indiana State locker room, and it does. In Indiana, where I've been all of this week, that moment still reverberates today in the lives of people.
What do you hope people say about the book when they're done reading it?
Well, I mean, I hope it's the Larry Bird story like it's never been told before. We always do the Bird magic thing.
Yep.
And when you do that, it's a bit of a disingenuous narrative. In 1979, that game we're talking about, they're not friends, they're not rivals, they're not anything. Magic, plays him in that one very, very important game, but he doesn't do anything to shape Larry Bird's life before that. And so what I wanted to do was tilt the camera a little bit and change the perspective, and really focus in on the rise of Bird in Indiana. And when you do it that way, you see this cast of characters around him, all underdogs, all cast-offs, who are, shaping, changing, and at times saving Larry Bird. And I think that's just a powerful story that we don't know, or that we have long forgotten.
Larry had a lot of things happen, adversity and, his dad and all these different things. And people thought at that time going to Indiana, right, and play for Bob Knight, one of the premier programs. Ends up not working out. He takes a shot at Indiana State. If he doesn't take that chance on the Sycamores, what happens to Larry Bird? Is he working as a blue-collar guy the rest of his life, just making three-pointers in a back hoop, without a net and nobody looking at him the rest of his life? Is that what happens?
Well, when Bird enrolls at Indiana to play for Bobby Knight in August of 1974, he makes it 3 weeks. There's a lot of fresh reporting in the book about that. Yeah. And then he, leaves, drops out, goes home to French Lick. And in that winter of 74, 75, I do think Larry Bird nearly slips away forever. Recruiters for a while are still looking for him. But Bird tells his mother to run them all off. She slams the door in faces of recruiters. She even slams the door in the face of the recruiter who comes down from Indiana State, a man named Bill Hodges. But Bill Hodges was a lot like Larry. He is stubborn. He's persistent. He grew up in rural Indiana. He knows what it's like to be poor and overlooked. And he didn't take that no for an answer. He goes looking for Larry. And it really is this connection, a personal connection between Bill Hodges and Larry Bird that really does pull Bird back from the brink, and gives him a lifeline to latch onto. And when that happens, Bill Hodges, does things for Larry Bird at Indiana State that, Bobby Knight never did at Indiana. He creates a safe place for him. He gives him a place to live. For a while that summer, Bird lives in the basement of Bill Hodges on Ohio Street in Terre Haute, where Bill is charging him rent to cover their NCAA bases. Bill helps get him a job, helps put money in his pocket. These are things that Bobby Knight didn't do for Larry because Bobby Knight didn't understand what Larry needed. Bill Hodges did.
Keith O'Brien with us here on the ML Sports Platter. A couple more for the terrific author of Heartland, A Forgotten Place, An Impossible Dream, and the Miracle of Larry Bird. It's online where books are sold, your nearby bookstores, Barnes & Noble, and all the rest. And while you're at it, just grab his other book on Pete Rose, too. Just do a 2-for-1. They're both so good. A lot of times, it depends on the era you play in. Your success, your legendary status, how you're compared generationally, and layers beyond that. The era you're in, that's just that. It's when you're born, when you come in, how you play, what your rivals are. It's just what it is, the era. If Andy Murray isn't in the era he's in with Federer, Djokovic, and Nadal, maybe he's got 7. My man Josh Allen, maybe he's got 1 ring if Patrick Mahomes isn't there and he's got a different head coach. We can go on and on about it. Drexler, Barkley, Ewing, Miller, Stockton, Malone, they have a ring without MJ? Maybe. Who knows? Larry Bird, playing in the 80s, saving the league, him and Magic, this and that. I always think about those guys, though, and Michael Jordan and all these guys without social media, without the craziness of today. Larry Bird, He wanted to play a game, put the curtain, I'm out, right? I mean, he was a very private guy. How much do you think, Keith O'Brien, he benefited from no social media and the age we have today?
He definitely benefited, but knowing what I know about Larry, I think he just wouldn't have social media today. He doesn't have social media today. He's not an online presence. He's not in the conversation. He, wanted to disappear from the spotlight 50 years ago. And finally now in 2026, he seems to have pulled that off. So he definitely benefited from playing in the time that he did. But if he played today, Bird would just not be online. I believe that.
But he'd still have the locker room stuff, though. He'd still have the pressure cooker of Boston. He'd still have all the reporters in his face. He'd still have the other stuff. He'd still have all the cable channels. You walk into a locker room, there's 50 guys in an NBA Finals, maybe 100, not 4, 10.
Fair. That's fair. Although, playing in Boston in the 1980s, you had, 2 thriving newspapers with multiple beat writers.
Yeah.
That's a city that demands greatness.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of pressure in Boston in the 80s. Let's be honest. That's a franchise and a city that expects greatness. When Bird was drafted in 78 to join the Celtics, they got him because they were terrible. They had cratered and bottomed out. So that pressure was still there, but you're right. What would not go well today, to your point, is that, Larry at times was very curt with the press. He snapped at the press. At times he threw punches at fans in college. These kind of things in the 1970s, were overlooked.
Right.
And
somebody's got a phone at that game. 100 people snap that. Right. I mean, everybody's got a phone at that game. Bang. That's the stuff I'm talking about. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. So those moments go viral. That changes Bird's trajectory. No question. No question. I mean, there are 2 games in 78 and 79 in which he throws a punch at a fan. Right. One of those punches he lands squarely. In today's social media environment, those moments go viral, and that would change how we think about Larry Bird.
Yeah, I also can't imagine the black bag that Larry Bird gets in today's NIL portal era, by the way. The last question I have for you, you're the New York Times best-selling author of Charlie Hustle. You've now written this book about Larry Bird, the origins, the rise, and all the rest. 2 of the iconic names ever. They're on the short list of the greatest players in their respective sports. How are Pete Rose and Larry Bird similar, and how are they different?
Well, they're different in a few ways. Pete Rose was, undisciplined, let's just say, with the media. He said whatever he was thinking, and he paid for the consequences later. Larry Bird is incredibly disciplined. If he says he's not going to talk, he's not going to talk. If he says he's going to talk, he will talk. There is a discipline there. Pete Rose, a life filled with scandal off the field. Larry Bird has lived a remarkably clean life for 50 years, even with that spotlight that we were discussing before. So those are the differences. The similarities, though, I think are powerful. These are 2 men who both came from, rugged working class backgrounds, who did not have a head start in life in any way, who, scraped and clawed and fought for everything they got. And most importantly, perhaps, loved the game for the game. Pete Rose loved hitting for the sake of hitting. He would live in the batting cage after games, even after he was an MVP and a multi-time All-Star. Larry Bird lived for shooting and would seek solace on the court, shooting late into the night. I think that is why, both of these men, became great.
Yeah, I love that comparison. And there's no doubt that when you get to the level that they're at, you're just wired a little bit differently. No doubt about it. Heartland, A Forgotten Place, An Impossible Dream, and the Miracle of Larry Bird. The author is Keith O'Brien. All over online where books are sold, nearby Barnes and Nobles and all the rest. Go pick up a copy of this book. I'm telling you, it's must read. And while you're at it, go get the awesome book called Charlie Hustle on Pete Rose. He's the New York Times bestselling author of that as well. Follow him on all the social platforms as well. Keith O'Brien, thank you so much. Brought to you by Burn Dairy and Stanley Law Offices. I can't wait to have you on and see what's next another time, my friend. Enjoy March. Take care of that raspy voice, okay?
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.